The Atari 2600 is one of my favorite consoles. I love this thing, and if you saw my previous retrospective, you know all about that. But I also have another console from the pre-NES era, and that is the ColecoVision. And this month, I'm going to be taking a look at this. The ColecoVision was originally released in 1982. It ran for 3 years as it was discontinued in 85. It had about 150 just under games come out for it, and it sold over 2 million units, which for its time was actually pretty good. Unfortunately, this was one of the big victims of the video game crash in North America of 1983. Funny enough, this console was in direct competition with Atari's 5200, which, while that console was technically better and had better scrolling, this one did better in the long run. Let's start off with a quick unboxing. First thing I gotta admit, I love this little touch of having the logo emblazoned into styrofoam. Pretty cool. When you open it up, this box is jam filled with stuff. First, you get this vacation voucher for 150 bucks if you buy the expansion module 1. That's interesting. Besides that, you get instruction manuals for the console and for Donkey Kong. Then, you get to the system, 2 controllers, the RF box, the pack-in game of Donkey Kong, the RF cables, and the power brick. Let's go over all these pieces one by one. Let's start with the infamous one, the power brick. And holy crap is this thing big. To give you a little perspective, here's a standard Blu-ray case. Holy crap. That's friggin' gigantic. Also of note, these are kind of prone to failure at this point, so you're going to need to make sure that you get a working power brick with your console if you're looking to get one of these. Another thing to note about the power brick is the plug itself. It's got this weird 4-pin design, and basically the games run at 3 different power frequencies, so it can switch between any 3 of these, and one of them's a ground. The problem, though, is it's pretty much proprietary, so if this part of the cord breaks, you are out of luck. So once again, another thing to look out for if you're looking to buy this system. 3, 2, 1. The next piece up is the RF cable. And it's really friggin' long. It's at least 6 feet, which is pretty good because the controller cord is short. In here you have the standard RF plug that goes into this guy. The RF switcher box. So like any one of these, you plug this into the top, and you take these pins here, and you screw them into an adapter. Now a lot of people say that you should look into getting one of these coaxial ports that you can just plug right into the end of the RF cord, but I found the Coleco's one to be like a millimeter too thick. This is one for the 2600, so I've been lazy and just haven't picked one up for the ColecoVision yet. Maybe I'm just crazy, but I could never get this to fit right into here. Alright, let's look at the cartridges. Here's a standard cartridge for the ColecoVision. Comes in a standard shell with a black case. And there are some variations to what's on the label itself. Donkey Kong's pretty simple, so it just says it's Donkey Kong. One cool thing to note is that ColecoVision games that were ported to the 2600 have the same shell style, though they come in white shells. So if you see something like this, you also see by the text on here about how it's made for the Atari. Might be a little blurry, but it says it on there. Speaking of saying things, a lot of the games are also compatible with the Atom computer line. So the Atom computer was a gigantic computer add-on that could fit into the expansion module, and it was a colossal failure. If I ever get my hands on one, I'll talk on that another time, but just know it had a ton of bugs, a ton of issues, and it's probably not worth your time. Anyway, some games were compatible with both, like Time Pilot here, which says it right on the front, compatible with the ColecoVision and Atom. Another thing that the fronts would say sometimes are if it had a special controller requirement, kind of like Slither here. And at the bottom, well, you can't make that out well, but it says for use only with the roller controller. And the roller controller is the trackball controller, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. That's just the cartridges, though. Let's take a look at the box games. And, I mean, look at this. A big selling point for the ColecoVision was the fact that it had a lot of really almost arcade perfect ports. So, like Pepper 2 here, says just like the real arcade game. The back gives you a couple screenshots and a pretty lengthy description. One thing I like about this, though, is I guess this cardboard was like a standard size back in the early 80s because a lot of 2600 boxes are the exact same shape. The dimensions are pretty much identical. So, that's one of those cool little things about the time period. Now let's get to the console itself. And this thing is friggin' huge. To give you a little perspective, here's a Genesis Model 2. And it basically is completely dwarfed by the system. On the system, you get your cartridge slot here. You get a reset button, an on-off switch, which does not have an LED light, so if you can't get any power to your system, you're kind of out of luck. You're going to get real frustrated trying to figure it out. Besides that, you get a little caddy on the side here for your controllers, and the expansion module in front. I'm going to get to that in a moment. The back of the system's pretty basic. When you look back here, you have your power port, your RF cable, and a little switch dug in here for switching between channel 3 and 4. Pretty standard for the time. Now let's talk about the controller. As you can tell, like a lot of consoles, it has the numeric pad which has overlays, which I unfortunately don't own, so I can't show you. Besides that, it's got 2 action buttons which are kind of mushy and really not as responsive as you'd like. Also, they tend to break somewhat easily. Besides that, you have a controller stick which is also very stiff and not very good. I'll be honest with you, this controller kind of sucks. It's one of the weak parts of the system. 2, 1. Every game comes with a menu screen, and a cool option about the controller here is that you don't have to reset the game on the console every time you have a game over. If you hit the star button, you can restart the game with the option you had chosen, and if you hit the pound button, you can go back to the menu screen itself. It's a little trick, but it's actually a nice little time saver. Luckily, the controller has a 9-pin adapter, so for a lot of games, you can actually play it with the Sega Genesis controller. Though, you do need to have this controller so you can operate the menus in the beginning of the games. So keep this in the player 2 spot, have this in player 1, and you can actually make a lot of games a lot more fun. Besides the regular controller, I also have this. This is the roller controller. It's a trackball controller, and you know what? It works pretty well. Mine's not in the best shape, but the ball still works pretty well, and it's got these really nice buttons on the side here for each player. The standard controllers can plug into here, and there's a nice little switch in the front where you can switch between the roller and the normal joystick controllers. Hooking this guys up is a little complicated. First, you need to plug the actual power for the Coleco into the back of this socket, and then plug this into the console itself. Besides that, it takes up both controller ports on the ColecoVision. But there is a handy part to this. One great thing about the roller controller is the fact that it's also a pass-through for the standard ColecoVision controller. So basically, if you have this plugged in, you don't really need to unplug it or plug it back in if you want to use the trackball. Pretty convenient. Another great thing about the roller controller is it basically acts as an extension cord for your normal controllers. Now you don't have to be tied so close to the TV. 2, 1. So when it comes to the expansion port, there's actually a couple different expansions. There's a steering wheel, there's a fan-made expansion module, which allows the system to be about as powerful as an MSX computer, and there's this guy, the expansion module 1, which is the only one that I own. This is basically a full Atari 2600 console. The only thing missing from it is power. Now I know there's some people out there who actually mod these to have its own power, but it draws the power from the ColecoVision, it plugs into the front, and boom, now you have 2 gigantic libraries to play from. As many people say, this would never happen today. But if you're kind of a guy who's tight on space, this is a great way to save on 2 different consoles. Well guys, that'll do it for this intro. I own 15 games for this console, and I'm going to be going over every single one of them. So stay tuned for the rest of the month as we go through my entire ColecoVision collection. Until next time, guys, cheers.